But narcissists love to be the hero, and they love to jump on your side and call someone the bad guy. But as soon as you invest, they do the same thing to you. And so often there's this tendency from someone to kind of jump from narcissist to narcissist, not because they're being silly or naive, but because the narcissist is really being their white knight. Narcissists love to be the hero.
Did you know that your emotional intelligence could actually be a vulnerability in a narcissistic relationship? Today, Dr. Erin Leonard, expert and therapist who wrote a new book, How to Outsmart a Narcissist, joins me to talk about resiliency, vulnerability, attachment, and narcissism. So I'm super excited to have Dr. Erin Leonard on. I just recently came across her TikTok page, and she has a new book out. And I love the title. It's called How to Outsmart a Narcissist, which isn't that what we all would love to do. And so, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Leonard, who you are and how you got into this topic.
Sure. So I've been a psychotherapist for about 28 years. I love what I do. And in that 28 years, I've found more and more people have come to me who are, just really struggling with a relationship. And they have no idea that they're being emotionally abused or even that it's narcissistic abuse. And in my personal life, I've had, unfortunately, quite a few experiences with some, narcissistic abuse. And so really that connection between my deep understanding of what it is like and, so many of my clients' experiences really found that something in our culture that we have to address and we have to kind of correct and right the course because it's really, really destructive to us collectively as a people. Even.
Yeah. One of the chapters of the book is that emotional intelligence can be a vulnerability. So describe what emotional intelligence is, and let's talk more about the fact that it's not always a superpower. Sometimes it can actually be our kryptonite.
Sure. And emotional intelligence is really a great strength. And being emotionally available and having the capacity for empathy and self-awareness, insight, being able to be selfless at times when you need to in your relationships. Those things are absolutely wonderful. And every human being desires to be understood. And when you have empathy, you really seek to understand. You don't seek to teach or be right or convey you really seek to understand at a profound level, which makes a loved one feel less alone in their plight. And when they feel less alone, they feel more empowered. And so empathy is very empowering. But emotional intelligence initially can make you very vulnerable to a narcissist because emotionally intelligent people see the good. They naturally trust. They have faith in human beings, which means they do trust. They often have tremendous empathy. And so sometimes when you're just getting to know someone, empathy, it's a great thing. But what it can do is it can make you kind of excuse red flags. Empathy, you're like, well, I could understand why that happened. And when you excuse red flags or kind of sweep them under the rug, there's a chance that someone who does play the victim or is exploiting your empathy can really manipulate you. And so really, the book is about how to understand your emotional intelligence, embrace the gift, also know how initially in any relationship, it can make you very vulnerable to manipulation.
Would you say that the narcissistic personality traits or style is the opposite of an emotionally intelligent person?
Yes, but it's very deceptive because narcissists are charming. They are funny and they are dynamic in ways. And quite honestly, a lot of them are extremely interesting.
The other thing that kind of trips me up, have you heard of this called by Dr. David Snarf, mind mapping? They're very good at anticipating people's innate needs and wants and desires. They're really good at knowing what you want, where your hot buttons are. And I know for me, I mistaken that as self-reflection and insight and awareness when it really actually wasn't any reflection of that at all.
You're 100% correct. And narcissists a lot of times will ask a ton of questions in the beginning, not because they actually want to get to know you and are interested in you, but because they want data to have something that makes them feel more secure to have over you. And they love control. They don't want closeness, they want control. So they want to know everything about you. And initially you're thinking, they're so interested in me, they're asking all these questions. And so that can be very confusing. And narcissists love to be the hero. And so often you're getting over narcissistic abuse. You find someone that is listening and asking you questions and jumps on your side and you think, well, they can't be a narcissist. They can't be a narcissist. They don't like this narcissist. But narcissists love to be the hero. And they love to jump on your side and call someone the bad guy. But as soon as you invest, they do the same thing to you. And so
Mhm.
often there's this tendency from someone to kind of jump from narcissist to narcissist, an EI person, not because they're being silly or naive, but because the narcissist is really being their white knight. Narcissists love to be the hero. They love to be the hero so they have something to hold over you. They love to broadcast it. Look at how great I am. Look what a great partner I am. So it's really kind of this fertile breeding ground for another kind of problematic relationship.
I almost liken it to their fantastic marketing, but they cannot carry out the job. Once you hire them, then everything falls apart. They can never deliver on the product.
Right.
And,
And what they do when they can't deliver on the product, they hide and disguise their emotional unavailability with blaming you.
yes.
They throw you off the track from catching on to their inadequacies emotionally by blaming you. And you go, oh gosh, is it me? Right. And
Yeah.
you're so busy thinking about what you've done or your part in it that you forget that, wow, they're really accountable over here.
Right. So how does emotional intelligence get developed?
The predictor of emotional intelligence is a secure attachment. Attachment is largely misunderstood because if you think about the phrase secure attachment, you think, oh, well, that person always feels secure. But it is actually an emotionally intelligent person that is quite aware of their insecurities. So if you're aware of your insecurities and you are in a relationship and you do feel insecure, it may be because your partner is narcissistic or something like that. But because you feel deeply insecure and you're aware of your insecurities, you might think, well, I have an insecure attachment, but that may not be true. So a narcissist is unaware of their insecurities. So they don't have a profound understanding of their insecurities. They're too defended. They defend against knowing it because it hurts too much. They're too fragile. And so they defend against any insecurities and then say, you're insecure, you're insecure. So a secure attachment style it's important to fully understand. And an insecure avoidant attachment style, that's the predictor of narcissism.
I was going to ask you, because I've seen pretty anxious narcissists. Do you think they're always avoidant?
So no, I think there's probably a little bit of a range there. And narcissists are profoundly insecure, but you'll never hear a narcissist say, I am really nervous about my ability to be vulnerable in a relationship. They defend against it by projecting, deflecting, playing the victim. And so all of those things are defense mechanisms, cognitive distortions that really keep everything out there. And so they can't dig deep and pull out an insecurity. But they will say that they're very anxious, and a lot of them are very anxious, and it's this generalized anxiety, right? So an EI person can say, I'm really anxious when I have a meeting with this particular colleague, because sometimes I feel like they say backhanded things. And then I get embarrassed and I get caught off guard. But take a narcissist and they're just generally anxious. I'm not going to any meetings. They can't pinpoint why. And so that general anxiety is from a profound insecurity, but they have no access to actually identifying and understanding what it is so they can cope with it better.
So what you're saying is it's not that having an insecurity means that we're healthy or secure. It's our awareness of it and what we do with it then says this is maturity versus immaturity. Is that what you're saying?
100%.
Okay, fascinating. So why don't you, for a moment, for those who are not familiar with the attachment theory at all, identify the different types? It could almost pretend like there's a T-shirt that they had a slogan on their front. What would each attachment style have on its front of this T-shirt as a slogan?
Okay, so a securely attached person is empathic. So that's a big part of a secure attachment. They have internalized a caregiver's love and they have felt loved and worthwhile and responded to. So they trust in others and they're strong enough to be aware of their insecurities and they're strong enough to identify them and then work on them. And so they actually take responsibility for their insecurities. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. Instead of having sympathy for people and wanting to be the hero, they want to understand human to human, which is a big deal. So instead of teaching someone or telling someone, they seek to understand. A securely attached person has insight. And so they look at themselves and they look in the mirror. And securely attached people are fairly humble. So they are also very introspective, accountable, and sometimes overly accountable. And so they'll take responsibility for someone so that person doesn't have to feel bad because they have empathy and they don't want that person to. Securely attached people are pretty grounded and they do get very anxious in many situations where there is someone who may be kind of targeting them unfairly or, saying devaluing things like that.
They could be avoidant too, right? I mean, they could say, you know what, I don't really need this relationship. I'm going to withdraw and focus on myself, but it's not a defensive style. It's more of a proactive, self-caring style, wouldn't you say?
That's a huge, great distinction. Is, of course, everyone gets defensive again. And your defenses go up and you don't do great things. And then they go back down and you go, oh, I didn't do great things. I feel bad. And they feel remorse. They want to repair a mistake. They have a strong conscience. And so all of those elements, and they are less defensive. But then you take someone with an insecure, avoidant, disorganized, and they're very defensive and they won't look at themselves. And, they do play the victim to get out of taking responsibility from themselves or to exploit someone else. They do not pause and go, wait, what is my partner? They literally don't have that capacity. It's, oh, no, absolutely not. You did that. You did that. You did that. And blame shifting and deflecting and projecting. And so they're missing this introspective piece. And that's very difficult too, because if you have one person in this relationship that's automatically looking at themselves naturally, not even knowing they're doing it, perspective taking, and then you have someone else in the relationship that never does that and is always like, it's your fault. There's this massive kind of exploitation of the emotionally intelligent person.
We're even using the word defensive, and I know that we kind of talk that out casually as if everybody knows what we're talking about. I would define it this way, and I'd love to hear what your definition, but to me, a person who's not defensive is a person who's able to be okay with themselves being perfect. They know how to handle failure. They can accept blame. Don't crash when something goes wrong. They kind of know how to pivot and make something good out of it. That's what I would say a non-defensive person's like. Would you agree with that?
I think that's very accurate. I do think that sometimes because emotionally intelligent people do feel so deeply that they have a momentary emotional crash. Like,
yeah.
But they're so resilient. They may stay down for a second, but they get up and they keep running. They can recover and then get stronger.
Yes, recovery. That's the big word. Whereas to me, a defensive person is a person who cannot accept responsibility or blame, cannot be at fault, doesn't allow themselves to see themselves as imperfect, fears insecurity, fears rejection, and essentially hides through their projections, through the blaming of other people, offloading responsibility, denying any responsibility, justifying what they do. With all these things that they do, they're avoiding basically being seen as human.
Yes. And they're avoiding any threat to their self-esteem or their ego. They're too fragile to handle it. So everything has to be out there. And I love what you said. I think that that's right on. And believe it or not, narcissism is a defense mechanism. And narcissism is universal. Just like emotionally intelligent people function with a little bit of reaction formation, a little bit of...
We justify.
Yeah. Justify, rationalize. I mean, we have defense mechanisms. Everyone does. A narcissist has more maladaptive defense mechanisms for sure. Splitting, projection, deflection. But narcissism is a universal defense mechanism. When we felt small as a child, we had to imagine ourselves as being bigger. And so sometimes, everyone has a little bit of narcissism. A narcissist has a great deal of narcissism, so much so, and the defensiveness is so robust that they can't look at themselves. No insight, not a lot of empathy, not a lot of grappling with deep and uncomfortable emotions. And so it's just out there. And a lot of the times I'll tell people that it feels good to be accepted. It feels good to be validated. Everybody has a little bit of vanity. All of that is very human. In narcissism, often it comes from our attachment relationships when our parents didn't see a very important part of us and never recognized it or validated it. When we get out and people in the world do, it's like, it feels so good, And so people will think, well, that's narcissistic. No, it's not.
Right.
It's just a universal kind of defense mechanism. When it's in extremes, that's when it's MPD.
Yeah. And to me, the extreme, if I was to summarize it, I would say the extreme form of narcissism or pathological or deep narcissism, whatever word you want to use, it's the narcissist's rejection of themselves. They're saying, I can't be who I really am because I don't like me. I reject me. So I'm going to show up the way you want it so that I can be seen as this really wonderful, all perfect person so that you and I are on the same page as that we like the facade because we're rejecting the interior person, which actually never gets really fully developed. I don't think they really do a whole lot of work on themselves.
Right. It's characterological. And narcissists don't really know. All those defense mechanisms and cognitive distortions are unconscious.
Yes.
So all they really know is, honestly, I think they have this profound belief that if they have control of another, that's actually closeness in love. So they seek to have control and they go about getting control, idealization, devaluation, that cycle of I love you, I hate you. And I'm going to emotional abandon you once I know you're invested. And then I'm going to love bomb you. And all
Yes.
of that, they get emotional control. And so I don't think they have not a lot of self-awareness.
Not only is it unconscious, it's pre-verbal.
Yes.
There's not even language to use to talk about it.
Yeah.
People say, well, why can't they change? Well, how do you change something that's such an intrinsic core that happens so early that you don't even have words to describe the experience to even define it? I mean, how do you get your arms around that?
Right.
I don't know how you do that.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and on top of it, I did some looking into the literature on neurological differences in the brain and then the brain structure. I don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is the brain structure born different and then it just continues to grow differently? Or is that early experiences such a profound experience that it gets capitalized on and then our brains continue to develop in a different way?
Well,
But by the time we get into adulthood, you've got a different style of brain that's functioning and seeing the world differently.
yes. All human beings, healthy human beings, come into this world hardwired neurologically and biologically, physiologically, genetically to attach. And so cross-culturally, all human infants are born with all the same things to attract caregivers, to maintain caregivers. If you think about it, it's pretty impressive. Like it's almost
Yeah, it is.
printing, like a Gosling would imprint. So they're hardwired to attach. It's their mission in life, a human baby. And so when they get what they need, their development flourishes, their brain flourishes, the mirror neurons are firing, the neurological pathways. You know, when a baby is stimulated in a positive way by their caregiver, whether it's mirroring or playing or anything like that, what happens is their neurotransmitters are fired and they build neurological pathways throughout their brain. And if you take a baby who's been emotionally neglected or left in prolonged periods of distress routinely for a very long time, that baby doesn't have those neurotransmitters that are firing and building those neurological pathways, nor do they have the mirror neurons firing. And so what you're saying is 100% correct. And that attachment style in infancy, it becomes their working model of attachment in adulthood. And that's why there's such a connection between EI and secure attachment and narcissism and insecure avoidant.
I do sometimes think, though, because I tend to fall in more in the biosocial explanation of narcissism, that it's a combination of genetic predispositions and vulnerabilities capitalized on top of early environmental experiences. And I know we all like to say, oh, it's trauma. No, I'm not saying it's trauma, although we could have a big discussion on even what trauma is. But I do think it's this kind of this connection. It's very hard to weave out which came first because I think they're so dynamic. You have a child who is easily overwhelmed by emotions, does not know how to self-regulate very well, but you could have a fantastic caregiver who's great at knowing how to cope with that dysregulation, knows how to provide a really fantastic, comforting environment, then over time begins to help the child learn how to instill that in themselves. But you could also have another child who's really great at it, but have such a chaotic, overstimulating environment that it overwhelms them consistently. And they then eventually don't know how to do it very well. They kind of lose the ability because of the chaos and the intensity and the overstimulation. In other words, there's so many dynamics. What I struggle with the most when I talk to people in the world is that we really want a simple answer. And there isn't a simple answer about how this happens. There's so many variables that can go wrong that it's not just there was domestic violence in the home or, oh, they were, sexually abused or whatever. There's so many variables that are highly sensitive and dependent on the interactions between the child's makeup and what their needs were and what that environment was able to do or not able to do, that it's just very difficult to explain.
Yes. And if you have a caregiver who's EI, who's, empathic and can soothe and comfort and help that baby regulate, because that's how a baby learns how to emotionally regulate, is they're comforted, they're soothed, then they can sustain states of distress for a longer period of time because they're getting practice at it. They trust that they will be helped. And those babies who actually have a secure attachment are resilient. So even though they may have trauma in their early life or, say the EI caregiver for some reason goes away, if that attachment is formed at 2, they have a great chance they're resilient, they can overcome trauma. And that is because they have access to the troubling feelings that trauma caused. It impacted their identity, it impacted their mental health. And so they can recover and they can use therapy, they can use empathy, they can do these things. But a narcissist it's what you said exactly. They are the epitome of not being resilient. They are not resilient. Trauma breaks them down. And you see EI people, even if they have ongoing trauma, they figure out a way to recover, repair their identity, move on, they get stronger, and they get better every day they're on this earth. And you see narcissists devolve. You see this kind of devolvement where they end up making really bad decisions, in their 30s.
After bad decision after bad decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't do the slogan of the 4 different types of attachment. So I want to circle back because I'm sure people are like, where is that? They didn't do that.
Okay.
So let's you and I have fun for a moment as we wrap up today talking about the 4 types. We talked a lot about the secure. So to me, I'm going to throw out what I think my slogan would be on that t-shirt for a secure person.
Okay.
That is, I'm human and I'm okay with it and we'll all survive, or something like that. What do you think that t-shirt would say?
For a secure attachment?
Yeah.
I'm human and and I know what I feel.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. Yeah. I'm okay talking about it. And I'm not.
I love that.
I think maybe what you said before too, not perfect.
Exactly. I'm human. I'm not perfect, but we'll all be okay about it.
Yeah.
I think for the anxious attachment, which is the clingy, fears rejection, it fears abandonment. When you say, am I kind of describing it accurately? This is a person who goes out of their way to make sure the other person's okay, to keep that person close. So what do you think their slogan would say?
I want to love you, but I can't because I'm too scared.
Yeah, I would almost add that I want to love you, so don't leave me because I'm really scared.
Yeah.
They don't want you to go anywhere away. I mean, they're trying to keep you super close.
Yeah.
And the avoidant person is a person who's come to the place where they think nobody really shows up. They don't really trust relationships. So they just they've learned to give up. They kind of like have this, they approach all relationships from this hopeless, helpless place. Like, it's not going to work, so I'm not even going to try.
I think you just nailed it with that last sentence. I think they're ambivalent. So it's like they're so ambivalent that it's any way the wind blows. I give this metaphor to some people, like, you know how there are those weeds in your yard that are super easy to pull? You could just pull them out with your pinky practically. Like, I feel like that's an ambivalent attachment style. Like, anywhere the wind blows, they unplug and replug, unplug and replug. Whereas a securely attached person is deep and profound attachments.
Yeah,
and even if a narcissist can't attach deeply to them, it's more superficial and it's more control.
Yeah.
And even though intellectually they know it's not a great relationship, they are still deeply attached and they feel mortally wounded when that relationship ends. Whereas an ambivalent attachment style or avoidant attachment style is totally ambivalent. Like, one day you're in their life and the next day they cut you out and like,
I would say their slogan is nobody ever stays, so I'm not even going to try.
Yes.
And then the disorganized one, that to me, this is the best I know how to describe it. That person learns that everybody's inconsistent.
Yeah.
So people show up and then people leave. And so they don't really trust because they're always waiting for the shoe to drop. Would you think that's a fair way to describe that?
Yes, 100%. And very impeded in their ability to be consistent in a relationship. Also, I would say is inconsistent in their ability to accept and integrate empathies. So I don't know if you've ever known anybody like this, but you dig deep, you seek to understand, you empathize, and they go, no, that's not it. You'll never.
Yes.
And you're like, I think I nailed it.
But I once had a client say, you sound very frustrated. No, I'm irritated. Like, what is the difference between frustrated and irritated? They're kind of really close to the same.
That's
okay, you're irritated. Yeah. You're
irritated.
That's right. So I would say an ambivalent or a disorganized attachment is a person who says, that's a harder one to define. How would you what would their slogan be?
I would say maybe somewhere in it would be nobody will ever understand me. They're wanting to be understood, but no.
Yeah. Like, maybe I trust you, but everybody lets me down.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, because it's always like, you're good for today, but you won't be good tomorrow. I know that. So I'm going to already anticipate the failure for tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has been so wonderful having you on today. We're going to jump over to do the podcast extra interview. And what I want to do there is talk to you about what you think is the narcissistic abuse survivor's biggest vulnerability when it comes to spotting a narcissist, and how can we approach that in a less vulnerable way, approach ourselves, our characteristics in a less vulnerable way.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on. How can people find you on social media if they want to know more about you?
Sure.
Can you give us your handles?
Yep. So my handle for TikTok is Dr_Erin_Leonard. Okay. And then I write for Psychology Today. My site there is called Peaceful Parenting, but I write mostly about EI, and Recourt Counseling is my website, and Dr. Erin Leonard.
We'll be sure to put all of those in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on, and congratulations on the new book. It's so exciting. That's a big deal. Yeah, you're welcome. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? Find me at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. And whether you're in, consider leaving, or have left a narcissistic relationship, find community support at my Toxic Free Relationship Club. You can learn about this resource as well as others at kerrymcavoyphd.com. Now you don't need to wait a week to get your next podcast fix. Join Breaking Free from Narc Abuse at substack.com to get exclusive audio content for subscribers. To sign up, click the link in the show notes. And I'll see you back here next week.